the bandages and sterilize the equipment.
Well, that's good.
My name is Doris Ward, and I was a teacher here in the school for 10 years. But before I came here, I grew up in Arkansas, and small town, just a little bit larger than Haines, so I was used to a small town. Went through college in Arkansas, graduated with a degree in English and history, and I wanted to travel, so I had an English degree in English, so it wasn't anything that would help me travel, but I did go and apply for a civil service job, and I didn't have to take an exam because I had good records, in the background, so I got right in, I got that job, and I went to Japan as a news writer for the Air Force. I was not in the Air Force, I was a civilian employee. I went over there in 1954. That's before you were born, before your mother was born, before your grandmother was born. And I stayed 2 years writing news for the Air Force. I was under contract to them, so I got my way paid over there and paid back if I stayed 2 years. If I didn't stay 2 years, I had to pay my transportation back. So I could leave anytime I wanted to. But I enjoyed it a lot, and it was, 10 years after the war, so things were rebuilding and things were cheap, and the Japanese people enjoyed our company. They didn't want us to leave right away. I really enjoyed it. I got out a lot and saw a lot of the area, and I found out that the Japanese students were very eager to get an education because they realized that an education was their key to a good job, and they all hoped to learn English because they thought that would be a better job. So as part of my job in the Air Force was to work with the Japanese community and making speeches or talking with them, doing things like that. And one of the best things I did was talk to a group of Japanese boys who were still in the high school age, but they were from a lower class, so they weren't in the elite society. And they, through a YMCA program, were taking English. And they wanted me to come, and I said, now, do you want to learn to diagram? Do you want parts of speech? Do you want all that? And they says, no, we just want you to come and talk because we've been taught by a Japanese speaker, and we want to hear an American speaker of English. And so I'd go there once a week and sit around a table, sort of. In fact, the classroom was an old rail car, so it was looked exactly like this. And the students came there after they'd been in school all day long, and they asked questions, and I just talked to them. So that bunch of students, that bunch has a southern accent. They don't sound Japanese, they speak.
What do you think was the biggest difference between Japan and America at that time?
At that time, well, they were very poor because of the war. In the city that I was staying, Nagoya, which was about the second or third largest city in Japan, had 2 or 3 million people, I've forgotten exactly, but it was a large city. And I was there 10 years after the war, and they told me that 85% of the city had been destroyed by incendiary bombs. Those are bombs that hit and then fire goes out. And Japan was mostly built of wood. Wooden houses, wooden temples. Now the downtown buildings were concrete and steel, but out in the countryside it was mostly wood. And we had a picture in our office that showed the city of Nagoya. Where we were was an ex-municipal building. You could see all the way across town, and there wasn't a thing but debris. They built back very quickly. And comparing that with Europe, I was in Europe just months after I'd been in Japan. In Germany, for example, you'd go down blocks and there were still great heaps of rubble left from the war because their buildings were stone and steel, concrete, and they hadn't rebuilt as quickly as Japan had. But they were more progressive, I think, at that time. They had more things developing than Japan did. Japan was still very poor at that time.
What types of news stories did you write for the Air Force?
Well, I've often said that I could write any story because I did propaganda for the Air Force. If I could make them look good, I could make anything look good. Now I worked in an office that was completely staffed by airmen. My boss was a major who was still a civilian at heart, so he wasn't that strict military, hardcore officer that I ran into. There were a lot of them there, but my boss was a civilian at heart, so we understood each other. I had officer standing, although I was not called that. I was just below the major, and then there was a master sergeant, a staff sergeant, a couple of airmen. We had 5 or 6 in the office, and some of them changed while I was there. What we wrote was major stories. If there were a crash or something like that, the major would have to handle that. As I said before, we were liaison between the Japanese community and the Air Force. There were 40,000 Air Force people there, and that's a pretty good sized community. They had their schools, they had PX, they had, a community where the dependents lived, so it was like a little city. But I lived downtown in a building that had been an insurance building, right on the main intersection in downtown Nagoya. I had a good spot. And one of the other of my jobs was I was a wing historian. All the groups around the wing, which was the headquarters, would send in histories of their unit every quarter, and then I'd have to compile all that into a wing history. And that's filed somewhere, I don't know where, they probably threw it out later, but that was kind of interesting too. We didn't have a very exciting wing, so there wasn't, there weren't fighter planes there fighting each other or any of that. But I did have to go a couple times on an air crash that was not too good. I wrote some speeches for the commander. I had to write 2 or 3 letters back to a family. I remember one in particular. A boy was killed somewhere, and the major was going to be gone, so he said, write this mother. And she had written a letter on, you remember those little tablets that you used to get in the dime store, to write letters on, and had paper about so big? Well, that little letter was like that she wrote me from Tennessee. And she was talking about losing her son, but he'd always described the area as looking very much like Tennessee. It had little rolling hills and so forth. I had to write to her, and say how sorry the Air Force was that he was lost. And those things I had to do. They weren't pleasurable. I wrote some notices. Oh, I remember the commander would have to give a Thanksgiving speech, and so I'd get a job like that. I'd write it as though I were the commander, thanking the good Lord for all the benefits we had and how glad we were to be in Japan, and that was good. I'll show you this little wood carving I brought back from Japan. This is sandalwood. I like wood, so I was attracted to any of the carvings that were made out of wood. And this Japanese figure was a story they told their children about a young boy in Japan. He was a poor boy, and he would go out to gather the firewood for his family, and he would read. He liked to read, so any task that he was doing, especially carrying the firewood, he would carry a book with him. And I've forgotten his name. He had a name, but this was a famous sculpture, and you'd find it all over. And the interesting thing about the little book, when you look at it, is it's written so the letters are up and down, the way the Japanese letters would be on a book, not crosswise. I can't remember his name. I've thought and thought, but I can't remember. This is sandalwood. And the little shoes, it's just exquisite when you look at the details, because the little sandals that he has on are called Zori, Z-O-R-I. And that's long before I saw flip-flops around here. And these were made out of straw, and you could buy them in the stores for equivalent to us 10 cents a pair. They were made out of straw and didn't last very long, but that's what the natives wore, the Japanese. There was another shoe they wore that was built up about 2 or 3 inches. It was a wooden, and you could hear them clip-clopping down the street. They're called Geta, G-E-T-A, and you could hear that distinctive sound late at night. Now, things like that stay with me. You know, I can still hear that sound in my mind when I think about it. Well, after Japan and after touring Europe, I came back to Arkansas, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't think I wanted to continue in journalism, but I didn't think I wanted to teach. But I did teach. I taught 2 years, and I decided, no, I didn't really want to teach. And then I went back to school and got some graduate work. I went to LSU in Louisiana, and I went to the University of Arkansas and studied some graduate courses in journalism. I was still meant and determined to go into journalism one way or other. In the meantime, I had worked off and on for a weekly newspaper in my hometown. I did that when I was in high school, and that was back in the days when the type was set metal type. You set it letter by letter, and there was a linotype machine, and the operator would use a keyboard, and little metal letters would fall down into a line of type. That's why it's called a linotype. And that's the way the newspapers were set then. Quite a difference from the way we see newspapers today with the offset process. I learned a lot then because my mistakes were, my people in the town would tell me about my mistakes. And you knew everybody, just the way we do it in Haines. That was a good experience.
How difficult was it to work with the typewriters back then?
Oh, typewriters? Oh, I thought it was wonderful. I had a little portable typewriter that I took with me as I traveled. I didn't take it on all the little trips. I had it with me in Japan, and I used that. Of course, we had typewriters in the office. They were electric, as I remember, and I had taken typing in high school, so I knew the touch system. And I never was a fast typer. I was pretty accurate, but I wasn't very fast, maybe 50 words a minute or so. And when I got on a computer, well, I got much faster. That's interesting because it's easier to use than a typewriter. You had to depress the keys a little bit harder. And when I was teaching here at the school, one of the happiest days of my life was when the superintendent found me an old beat-up typewriter that I could take in my classroom. We didn't have computers and individual computers. And that was a big day when we had our own typewriter. And it was one of those great big awkward things. We were tickled. That was good. So then I, after I got my graduate work, and I went back to college and got a master's degree, and decided then that I wanted to go back to teaching. And I wrote a three-paragraph letter to the Department of Education, Juneau, Alaska. I didn't know any place in Alaska. I didn't know anybody in Alaska, but I thought I'd come up here because in a class I was taking in my education courses, a woman from Kenai was in the class. And that was before the boom, before Kenai had grown very much. And she talked about the things they did there, and it sounded like so much fun. I thought, well, that would be fun to go to a small community in Alaska. Now, you have to understand that I grew up in hot weather. And I thought, that's not going to be good. I won't last a year in that cold weather. I wrote this letter to the Department of Education, Juneau, Alaska, and described where I was and what I was doing, my credentials, my background, and what kind of school I wanted to come to. Now, if you don't think the good Lord watches after me, on the very day that that letter came to Juneau, the superintendent here in Haines wrote to the Department of Education saying they had an opening in the English department. And so they referred my letter to him, Mr. John, and he wrote on the bottom of my letter that I'd written to Juneau, I'd like to have you do an interview. I had no idea where Haines was. I couldn't find it on the map. Didn't know anything about it. But what attracted me, he finally, and I hadn't told my parents or the superintendent of the school, I hadn't told anybody that I'd written this letter. And it was about April or so, toward the end of the year. So I got a phone call one day, and the superintendent's office asked me to come down to the superintendent's office to take the call. And it was from Mr. John. Now, I'm standing in the superintendent's office in Arkansas trying to talk to Mr. John and not let the superintendent down there know what I was talking about. So I'm sure Mr. John thought, I'm not sure I want her up here. I was answering, yes, I don't think so, okay. So I told him I'd call back later. Then later I called and talked with him, and he knew exactly what buttons to push on me. I was teaching I won't say I was teaching. I had 185 kids per day. My largest class had 48 kids in it. We had a room that was maybe twice as big as this, and it was those old wooden desks with the arm desk on it. They had actually nailed the row together so you couldn't move the desk, because if you moved the desk, you couldn't get them all in there. So they were nailed together. And I was just completely worn out. I was just frazzled. I was teaching English, and I couldn't even assign essays because there wasn't any way I could mark them all, read them, much less mark them. And so he knew that situation. So he said, you'll have 77 kids. And I thought, well, heck, I've only got 48 in the class now. I don't think I want that. And he says, no, all day long, not one class. My largest class was 8 here, I think. So I said, yes, I'll write you. And so I sent a letter and was hired. That's how I got to be in Haines. And I started teaching in room 10 over in the building that's on Main Street. That was called the new high school then. And the principal, Mr. Carl Ward, took me around and showed me the new building. And I thought, gee, this is nice. There wasn't a mark in it anywhere, and it had been built like 9 years before. They just kept very nice care of that building. And I enjoyed that. I had a room overlooking the mountain there. I had a room with a view. The kids were good. The worst time was one year I had to teach a bunch of 7th graders. I thought, well, this may be my last year. But it worked out. Then we moved over here in '73, and started out the new building here was an open area. So my room was in that open area. And I liked it. A lot of people didn't, but I liked it. And that was the year we got the new swimming pool. And Mr. McFeeder's father was a principal then. And he'd been kind of responsible for seeing the swimming pool. And somebody on the sidelines pushed the man in the swimming pool. He had his glasses and his wallet. He really didn't know it was going to happen. So that was kind of fun. I married Mr. Carl Ward in 1970, and the gym is named for him. He was superintendent here, and he died in 1997. And people thought maybe I'd go back to Arkansas after that, but I thought, no, I've got roots here now. This is my home, and so I've been here ever since. And since I retired in 1975, and when I was teaching, that's all I did. I just didn't have time to do any volunteer work or do anything else. But after I retired, then I had the energy and the time to do some volunteer work, and I got involved with the museum and the library and the church and historical society and different organizations. Enjoyed that. I've also done some freelance writing after I retired. Started a duly noted column in the local newspaper. I had to convince them that was a good idea. I was from a small town, see, and the people down at the news office they had urban or big city backgrounds, and they said, no, that won't go. Just let me try it for a while. And it was funny, when I first started going out and talking to people, they didn't really want to talk to me because they were suspicious about why would I not want to know that? And I said, no, it's not going to be bad. I don't write bad things. And after a little while, they got convinced that it was all right. And people would tell me, I never had my name in the paper before. And this was a positive column, so they didn't mind having their name in the paper for that. And I've done the freelance in other areas. I did all of the public relations writing for Act Fest when it was here. That was good because I got to see a lot of actor-type people. That was fun. And now then I'm writing a column called From Alaska for my hometown newspaper. And that's fun. I send it back to Arkansas and I write about things that are going on here. So I find, one of the best things I've done recently is I got a ride in the dog sled the other day out at the fairgrounds. I was standing there trying to take some pictures and there was a whole bunch of kids lined up behind me. And Jim Stanford looked over and he said, come on, Doris, get on board. I just went right ahead of all those kids, got on board. Well, it took about 3 people to help me get on board, but I got on board. Wet and cold and snow and pellets coming in my face, but it was great. I had it all the way around the perimeter of the, and I came back out. It took about 6 people to get me out of the sled. Nobody threw rocks at me, so I guess they weren't too bad that I cut line. A lot of things going on, and I find that that's what keeps you growing and alive, is just keep busy, find new things to do. And a lot to do in this town if you just kind of look for it a little bit. Stay alert. Right now I'm looking forward to the big read starting pretty soon. I like to read. That'll be good. The Maltese Falcon, be good.
What changes have you seen in Haines over the
changes?
years?
Well, I've got pictures of open lots from the bank down and all the way through the senior citizen, all that area. There wasn't a thing there when I came here. Houses was not there. I've seen all of that, buildings growing up. I've seen the new school develop. I've seen the church burned, and the Presbyterian church burned and rebuilt. Lots of houses. I live up on Osland Drive at the top of Young Road, and when I got there, my house was about there were 3 houses on that street. And now I drive up behind my house, Highland Estates. I never thought I'd see that much traffic in front of my house and behind my house. It's just all day long. Your house was not there. Those houses on Young Road weren't there. None of those roads were paved. Just a lot of changes. And most of the real grumpy, ugly people have left. The good people stay.